Well, thank you very much. So we begin. I'd like to talk about these three topics, really. Our transition from oral to written culture and showing how printing from movable type has changed our world. And this transition to digital media. I feel like I have one foot in the 15th century and one in the 21st, although I have a fondness for the oral tradition, so maybe I have a foot in the 25th century BCE as well as current. So I'm quite fascinated with the idea that we make noises at each other and you get a response. It's quite extraordinary. And why? And Socrates had some caustic things to say about why we should not accept the written word, and I'll let you read that. Can you all see that to read? And that's still true. There's a similar thing going on now with older people not really wanting the digital things that are being offered to us, and I think there's some natural resistance across generations. But for Socrates, memory was the thing, and to him, he seemed that knowing something intrinsically from memory was more vital rather than book learning that he thought was, to me, flat. I don't know about you, but for me, when I have memories, it feels like they're more dimensional, that I can move a thought around and see it from different places and consider it more deeply. But when I have learned something from a book, it takes a lot longer for it to move from that flat place into the dimensionality in my brain so that I can see it that way. So I was reading in this new book, The Shallows, which is getting a lot of negative criticism, but I've only read a few chapters about this sort of thing, and I was very impressed with what he had to say about the brain connections, how literate and non-literate people have sections of their brain light up differently, and I'm really quite fascinated by that. Actually, I'm a perfect foil for Socrates here because my memory is not very good anymore, and for both the age and the medical reasons, and so I have to rely on reminder here too. So, and to realize that the reading a phonetic alphabet versus logographic, like Chinese, takes up different space and amounts of the brain. I'm just fascinated by that. And less space and amount is required for an alphabet, that we have distilled down more meaning into the forms of the letters than in a logographic system. And I've read before that scientists believe that the brain evolved to be able to look for the tiger coming or danger and food on the savannah. So they short attention span and scanning the horizon. Those were the qualities that were favored. So it makes sense that we would be short attention span kind of people. But now with the reading culture, we are taught to concentrate, and we are punished for not sitting still and concentrating. So with the internet effect, I wonder whether we are allowing ourselves to go back to our more instinctive state. It's going to be very interesting in the next 20 years or 30 years to see what kind of balance comes out from all that. And the other interesting thing was at the beginning, the written language was spoken aloud and was more of a social event. And silent reading didn't come first. Notation of that was St. Ambrose in, I think, 383 A.D., talking about he was reading without speaking, and some other people thinking that he was possessed by the devil. So it was very unusual activity. But so that was a more social aspect, and silent reading becomes more of an individual act, and you can have your own thoughts separate from the group, which the reading aloud or the storytelling around the campfire in that oral tradition was more reinforcing of, rather than the you being able to have your own opinions kept to yourself. And so I think that he is positing that that has had great social effects over the centuries. But a man that I greatly admired, who lived here for 20 years maybe, and died just a few years ago, William Bright, who was married to Lisa Men. You might know her from the linguistics department here. He was an anthropologist and linguist, and said he actually preferred the company of non-literate people. And these were two of his reasons, that this sense of when you have in your, kind of floating in your mind the memories of something or an intellectual idea, that you can have a deeper knowledge of it and gain more wisdom than from book learning. And that in a similar way that the written language, I have watched people try to read the instructions for unjamming a Xerox machine, and you have the cryptic message information on the side, and you open up the machine and you cannot connect the 2D to the 3D, and people get very confused and all of that. So I think that's another aspect of the how more oral language can be more effective. So going back to the origins of writing, I'm almost all speaking about in the West, but I wanted to acknowledge that there's more evidence for the earliest writing in China than in the West. But cuneiform in the Fertile Crescent began the march to written language in the Middle East. These are some of the calligraphic styles through the centuries that go from what we call black letter here in the far right, and this is a bookhand, and up on the upper right is the Carolingian minuscule, and that is the basis for the bookhand that transformed into the first typefaces. And I've been a calligrapher in the mid-70s. I took a lot of classes and have an affinity for calligraphy, and I'm constantly telling graphic design students that they won't really understand their profession well until they have learned a calligraphic hand, that the organic physicality of making a line of letters will teach you spacing and alignment and things that learning from a book about graphic design just cannot provide, learning spacing and so forth. And here's another example of the calligraphic hand. To the left is italic, and that's a writing manual of how to hold the pen. And here, this is critical for the understanding the development of typefaces, that at the, that's like 11 o'clock on the clock, that there is, the way the pen is held at a 45-degree angle, this broad edge pen makes a thin mark, becomes thick, goes thin again. And that will be translated into the early typefaces. And then we get to the movable type world in the 15th century, and this is type from my collection, Deutsche Schrift, designed by Rudolf Koch, 1920s. Calligraphy moved in two directions around the first of the 20th century. The British school was more legible, writing out quotes and that sort of thing, and being more literary, whereas in Germany it became more expressionist. So in the 20s and 30s, Rudolf Koch and others, Rudolf Lerisch, had much more expressive uses of calligraphy, which I just love. And this is one of Rudolf Koch's designs. And this is 24-point type, so imagine on your computer screen 24-point type. But on the upper left photograph, there's a very graceful curving shapes in very tiny pieces of metal. And part of the romantic appeal of this for me is knowing that rather curmudgeonly old men were creating this very graceful, beautiful stuff. And it seemed that I've wondered over the years about whether printing was a place for men to be creative in a socially acceptable way. You know, there was artists, but artisans and printers. You know, the old-time printers that I've met seem to be kind of closed and not expressive, but they did design. They did not call themselves graphic designers, they were printers, but they designed beautiful things. And I don't think either in their own male culture or the outside culture would have allowed that except in a place, in a manly place like a print shop. So I think it was a way for people to do things in this way. There were women in printing since early times. Usually it had to be the printer died and the widow took over the shop. And in San Francisco, which is not a surprise, there were women-owned printing businesses in the 19th century. When I lived in the Bay Area, there was an exhibit at the Historical Society about women printers in San Francisco that did. They usually started as proofreaders or at the desk kind of jobs, and some became typesetters, and hardly any were allowed to be press persons. But in San Francisco, there were women-owned printing businesses. So it's a side part. Now this is using the type that you just saw, this is what I printed with those letters. And I have a art subscription that for a certain amount of money that they pay me, then I will send each person a four pieces of art over the year. And this is one that I just sent out recently. And it's a famous quote by Rudolf Koch. We are type designers, punch cutters, which are the people who make the original designs, wood cutters, type founders, compositors, which are typesetters, printers and bookbinders from conviction and with passion, not because we are insufficiently talented for other higher things, but because to us the highest things stand in closest kinship to our own crafts. So he is linking, the high arts to high craft, and he was a craftsman. And one of the things, I teach printing from lead type and photopolymer plates, and that is one of the primary things I want to teach, is that sense of craftsmanship involved in making something, and the joy and satisfaction you can get from holding something up and saying, I made this, and doing it with integrity and doing it the right way. So, but I think that Deutsche Schrift is quite beautiful typeface. The lowercase k I had to find by process of elimination. That letter didn't fit anything else, so it had to be the K. So he was taking liberties. In making type, these are the original concepts and tools used. And again, it's quite remarkable that crude tools made that beautiful, those curves and relationships, visual relationships. And this counter punch and counter punch, and it's a positive to positive transformation to get the piece of the master size of the lead letter. So you make a positive of the crossbar, pound it into another piece of steel to make a negative, and then carve the negative space of the H in this guy, and then strike that, this is the same piece, strike that into another piece of steel, and then cut away around to get an H. That's a lot of trouble to go to. But for 400 years, that was how you made type, the master size of the type. So again, curmudgeonly old men filing away, for me, it has a romantic kind of appeal. So I want to do my best to honor their legacy. And here is the actual thing being done. That first photograph is a Hebrew character, and I'm just amazed that the shape is made by filing away, and if it gets too thin, then you file the whole surface down and start over again. And then the process of the master punch is driven into a piece of copper or brass, and then that is fit, and the mold of molten lead is poured into that to get the individual multiples. So the punch is the saved master copy. And this is the Renaissance, so 1450s, and what I'm also quite amazed about is the way in which this happened. If you remember history, that was society was looking back to Rome to get the best of the old stuff and have it reborn. At the same time, the challenges to the church were happening, and people who disagreed with the church were being burned. So alchemy was happening, burning materials to create gold. And I don't know whether Gutenberg could have found another way to do what he did because of the collective unconscious, that other than by fire. So this transformation of religion, kind of social change, religious change. Here, again, a social change of making printing available to many people, and beginning to break the hierarchy of the elites. This is actually a dangerous thing. The church was actually looking for a way to more quickly make copies of books because of the rising demand from the middle class and education. All the universities were starting and they needed books, so the copyists just couldn't keep up. So this was quite a boon to the rise of the middle class and education and so forth. So tremendous change was going on, and I don't think he could have done it other than through fire. So if printing had been invented or been, I actually don't know how the Chinese were using movable type then, how that was made. It might have been ceramic blocks, but if printing were developed and pushed in somewhere else, I I'm curious how it would have been created. And here's a little humorous thing of this is a woodcut of a typical print shop. In 1457, there was a printer's strike in Lyon, France, and one of the settlements was that the journeyman printers, which would be what I would be, were no longer allowed to beat the apprentices. So it's been downhill ever since. So this is that rack in the back would be where the type was stored. And the new technology really does mimic the old. In the left is an illuminated manuscript, in the right a printed book. And one of the Medici family refused to have printed books in his library because they were vulgar. And by this comparison, I'd have to agree with him that on the right they were throwing everything at it, trying to make it look sexy, but just can't do it. And here we come back to the calligraphic influence, that manuscript bookhand. Look at the lowercase a and e versus the lower 3 lines of Nicholas Jensen's printing type. He was in Venice, and he was among the first to change from the black letter style of the Northern Europe type to, as the Italians would do, kind of round things out. And the A and the E in his type mimics pretty well the bookhand. And this is how typesetting was done, and still is, from lead type. I'm setting the, can you read that phrase? Yeah, the written word remains. So you set type as if you were reading it from left to right, but the individual letters are backwards. And as printing got going, this is Nicholas Jensen. I have a page. This is a page that I have in my collection. Was regularizing some of the shapes. The calligraphers were being threatened, with unemployment, so they began to make some changes. And here are some close-ups of the two, and now the calligraphy is looking much more like the type. So, got to make a living. And then there's the writing master who went berserk. This is George Bickham, and those of you who are designers may know of Bickham's script in the digital type library. That comes from this style. So many from like 1600s through the 19th century, many fancy documents were done in this fashion, copper plate engraved. It's unbelievable scrolled work here, and legal documents and wills and all kinds of accounting documents were done this way. So they are trying to keep their jobs, as it were. Now I want to quickly go through some actual type enlargements from the early days to show you how the beginning of moving away from the hand, the influence of the hand. This is Aldus Manutius in 1499. He is responsible for much of how the book looks these days. He invented the pocket paperback idea. He really invented italic type to make it, it is usually much tighter in fit. You get more words on a page, so he was trying to maximize his profits from minimizing the amount of paper used. And this book, Hypnorata Machia Polyphily, is one of the most beautiful books in the world, in my opinion. And here the early printed books are on rough paper. The type is rather roughly made, and the angle in The Q is, the thin part is from 11 o'clock to 5 o'clock roughly. And watch that as we go along, as that will begin to come more vertically. So this is early on and less refined techniques. And here is a sample of it. He also did the shaped typography coming down to that point. That's quite pretty. And 50 years later is Garamond, and it's a little cleaner, not as much raggedness, and the paper is a little smoother. So here's a sample of that. That does feel French to me. I don't know if it does to you. This is a Dutch type. The letter forms are cleaner still. The thin spot is closer to vertical. And here's a sample. Originally Latin did not have word spaces, and the order of the words technically did not matter. I remember in high school I took 2 years of Latin, and I had a terrible time figuring things out in that way, that because of the word endings and the case and number and gender of the words all had to match up. You actually did not have to have it in the order that we, using English, need to have it. And there was no punctuation then, no word space, no punctuation. So reading then was a much more intensive activity to try to figure out which word went with which adjective. So word space is a relatively new idea. And here is Baskerville in the late 1700s. John Baskerville did printing some favors by inventing some means to make smoother paper, and he also designed type, and his type is cleaner. The methods of making type have improved, and here's a sample of that. And then we get to the logical extreme of the vertical thin section of type, and here's a sample of that. Italian fashion houses use Bodoni as their logos and look. It's very classy. It has come to be seen as a classy look. And just as architecture kind of shows the change through time to reflect social conditions or societies, type does as well, lettering and type. So I thought I'd show you a few of these that people don't really think of as relating. And here's one of my needs for reminder, is I have learned that the way I was pronouncing this word is wrong, so now I'm struggling to change it. I used to say boustrophodon, but apparently it should be boustrophedon. And that means, that's Greek for as the ox plows. So those first two lines go from left to right, and the second line down goes from right to left, which seems perfectly sensible in some way. Why do we always go way back to the left to start reading another line? And so they were just as the ox plows, the lines went. So no one knows really why it stopped, but it did. And you see that the letters changed direction, except for some, like the alpha and tau and eta, that have the quality called bilateral symmetry. So each half is equal, has the same form. And I wonder whether those were there to help tell you kind of which way are you going, and what's going to help you the rest of the way. Interestingly, just to show you that nothing has changed, the early dot matrix printers were Booster-Frieden. The data stream was sent down, and those of you old enough to have seen a dot matrix printer, it would print zip across to the right, zip across to the left. So it was doing that same action 2,500 years later. Nothing's new. And the early laser printers, this company I worked for in Southern California, the cathode ray tube typesetting machine did the same thing. It would send down the data stream, and a lens would reflect onto the light-sensitive paper with a mirror that would go to the one edge and come back, rather than the mirror coming all the way back to start again. So it's engineering-wise, it's efficient. So the Greeks were onto something there, and I'm curious why they stopped. So those are some of the architecture feels like it's in sync with some of these lettering styles to me. And like the third one down in the Middle Ages, spiky architecture and spiky lettering. It's kind of in the collective unconscious. And here in the Enlightenment, cleaner looking architecture, cleaner looking type. And some of these don't fit for me, but the third one down in particular, Accidents Grotesque is one of the mothers of Helvetica, but that 1890s. But for me, that's Art Nouveau, and like the metro station in Paris, there are plenty of Art Nouveau typefaces that were out at the same time, so I would have used one of those. And then we get into the time of the Bauhaus and the linearity and steel and glass architecture. So these are some of the newer stripped down typographic looks. And here in the 1920s, the Golden Cockerel Press is one of the famous fine press limited edition book presses in the world. And in the upper right, they look staged to me. Like, when is this photograph going to be done? And the man on the left is pretending to set type. He's looking for something in there. The two cases he has, there you have a cabinet of cases. If you want not to be seen as a newbie, be sure to say a case of type, not a drawer of type. He has two there. He's got his arm on the bottom case, which would have the small letters in it, and the case above that, he would have the capitals and small caps in it. So that's where we get uppercase and lowercase. And at the same time in the 19th century, letters were often called sorts, individual pieces of lead. And if when you buy type, you only get a certain number of A's, B's, and C's. Z's are usually the fewest, X's and Z's. So if you haven't planned ahead and counted characters and estimated how many of anything you need, and you're setting type, and you run out of something, you're going to feel really angry and frustrated, and so you're going to feel out of sorts. You might know that term, that phrase. Young people don't know that phrase very much, but older people do. So you can't go forward. You don't want to go back. So you're mad. But which is so the prudent type printer will always estimate how much he needs of whatever type. And this is the same press, the Golden Cockerel Press, and this is from a terrific book called The Typographical Masterpiece about the printing of the four Gospels, which combined the Golden Cockerel press with Eric Gill's type and his wood engravings. And here is the lockup for printing a 2-page spread, hand-set type, and a very large wood engraving by Eric Gill. And this is the left-hand page as it was printed. And it's one of the more beautiful books made. Wood engraving is not wood cut. Wood engraving uses the end grain of wood, and wood cuts use the flat part of the wood, so it's not as crisp. But the tubes of wood that are moving vertically when you cut into an end grain block can stop at the separation between those tubes, so you get very sharp edges out of them. And John Dreyfus was the successor to Stanley Morrison, who was responsible for Times New Roman being designed as an advisor to the Monotype Corporation in the 50s. And in the 80s, when I was in the Bay Area, he came to visit Chuck Bigelow at Stanford, and Chuck and Chris did not lived in San Francisco and did not have a car. They took the train down to Stanford, and I lived there. So Chuck had me drive John Dreyfus around, and he was the quintessential English gentleman, very precise and gentlemanly, and clever and humorous. And I had him autograph a book that he had an article in. He was a wonderful writer about type, and he inscribed it as "You are my driving force," and that kind of English sensibility is what I really enjoy. So he wrote the book about the making of the four Gospels, and it's a terrific book. So now we come to the more modern age. And but first came phototype, which was from photographic negatives, either that usually spun around in some way, and exposure was exposing tube light was flashed as the particular letter went by, and these lenses would change the size to whatever was asked for, and then that image, that letter was focused onto the light-sensitive paper. And that's also a lot of trouble to go to. But this was the beginning of the idea of one size master for every size of type. Before, in metal type, there were usually ranges of type made, a few point sizes with a metal master, and then a different design for a larger or smaller size. So they were more customized for proportion and readability and that sort of thing. But now, in the 70s, economics were driving things, and things needed to be done faster and cheaper. So one size was geometrically enlarged or reduced to get the desired size. So a large size would have gigantic serifs, and most of us only know that. But in monotype, a titling face had very thin serifs for 36 point, for instance, and then a regular size would have slightly different proportions. So we have mostly lost the relativity of design in that way, although with the advent of multiple masters and open type features in digital type, we are regaining some of the original qualities that were lost. And my experience as a typesetter was with phototype. I was the new technology coming in to change things. I worked for a printer in Boston that had 2 linotype operators, which was another machine for casting type, and they did not want to learn the new phototype, so I was hired to take their jobs. there were two of them, and I could do more work in half a day than the two of them could do all day. But linotypes were very fast for its time. So digital type can have a single master and be converted to pixels for all sorts of things. Like the bottom might be your cell phone, read out the bitmaps. The top one could be the book that's printed about some subject, the high resolution. And this is Lucida that Chuck and Chris designed in the early 80s. You know, the first laser printers were 300 dot per inch, so this style of chunky serifs and open counters to make things clear for the low resolution, they helped pioneer. And I spent 20 years in this font production world, and this is what I did often, although I did other things, but this is what drove me out of the digital type world. The bottom left is the letter M just converted to bitmaps as is. So one stem might have the 2 pixels and the others 2, and it doesn't, and a whole screen of that is going to look very bad. So hinting is a technology that I wrote little bits of code that told all the lowercase stems should have, at this resolution and size, shall have 1 pixel in width. So I made all these cross associations and wrote little bits of code to tell it to do that. But you see that upper left corner is still a little dark. So then we go to hand hinting, which drove me nuts. And there I wrote even more code to say, move the outline down in that upper left corner so that pixel turns off. And then in the middle stem, move the outline down so that the top pixel turns off and the next one down turns on. So that looks like an M, but it was painful to get there. And true type is what this is basically, has every point addressable, so I could move any point in the letter. And theoretically, you could change a serif font into a sans serif font by telling parts of the character to disappear. So true type is technically a superior system of font rasterization, but as with anything else, to do that much would make a very large file and make it very long to transfer in from the outline to the pixel bitmap that you see on the screen. So in the font wars of the late 80s, the subject was small size of file, fast speed of rasterizing, and quality. And you can have any 2 of those. But so being engineers, they could measure size and speed, but they couldn't measure quality. So the arguments mainly were about what was fastest and smallest. So that's how things have turned out there. So we have this very intricate world of digital, and I feel like people, when I started my letterpress business in the mid-90s, I felt that people were feeling distanced and uncomfortable with what was happening, and that they wanted more balance in their lives from a daytime of looking at a flat computer screen and their life at home. And it just seems to have increased the conflict, the psychic conflict that we endure of how to find our ways through the world of making a living and keeping your humanity. And I think for many people, learning a craft, whether it's ceramics or printing, letterpress printing, which is my way of dealing with it, or gardening or some other method, to get your hands dirty and use 3 dimensions, after the end of the day, of the workday. Uh-oh. I have no idea what that is. Okay, thanks. So, and I really think it's the juiciness of life that we are beginning to lose. And coming to some kind of a craft, I think, is a way to work with it. And these are some of the printing presses that I had at the time. And this is some of the tools of the trade. I apologize for the blurry type. I picked the wrong, I had the sharp type and the blurry type, and I picked the wrong one. It's hard finding good help these days. And now, this sense of needing some external way to regain some balance, I think calligraphers are choosing things like this, of more expressive means, and layering, either readable quotes or not readable letters. And it is, people are responding to this sort of thing, and I think it's terrific. So, where are we going? Is this going to be this boring, or shall we go to something, have some sense of this, rich, earthy, deep? I think most of us don't feel like we are able to choose. The technology is forced on us, but we do have to help technology make better decisions. And my opinion is that there will be at least a transition period between words and icons. As we become more globalized, and more things need to be readable by people of other writing systems, and perhaps there will be more icons. And who needs vowels now with texting? My understanding is that Hebrew typically does not use vowels. So there is a precedent for that, and these texting methods, I think I can understand that, some of these things. So why not drop some of the letters and use less, and maybe those will become icons in themselves, that you won't have to type GTG. If you just hit one keyboard stroke, and you get the entire cluster of forms. And there may be some communal sense of these pictographs for house. It's interesting that many cultures have decided that closed rectangle has some resonance for indicating a dwelling. So who knows? Maybe it will. I feel better about it now, having read the section about the brain and how it will regain some of its connections depending on what is being read. So maybe it won't be so bad. So the end.